2008 will go down in off-road history as the year everything changed in the ATV side of the industry. This is because in 2008, Polaris released the very first RZR. And any off-road enthusiast who hasn't been living under a rock for 10 years knows the RZR changed the game entirely. It's crazy to think that 2017 was only 10 years though, especially when you look at the progression of RZR models that have come out of Roseau, Minnesota, from the very first 50-inch RZR 800 to the latest RZR 1000 Turbo S. What's even crazier is the number of models that have been released over 10 years. If you count just individual models and not model subsets, you're going to come up with 15 different vehicles. Plus, there was 2 specialty vehicles with the RS1 and the 170. If you were to include all the subsets, the number would jump to at least 50, but probably more like 60 or 65. Not to mention, most of the 15 different RZRs went through at least 1, if not 2, or in some cases 3 complete makeovers. The sheer scope of the RZR product line and the influence it's had on this industry in only a decade is staggering. So we thought it might be fun to take a look back at where the RZR began, how it got to where it is today, and how Polaris has managed to stay on the cutting edge of pure sport side-by-side design for so long. The very first 50-inch RZR 800 was released in 2008. It boasted an 800 class parallel twin that produced 50 horsepower. The first version was pretty basic with just standard steel wheels, gas-charged shocks, and no fancy bling. When this first RZR model was released, AJ and I thought we'd died and gone to heaven. It was like driving a fully suspended, super powerful go-kart, and it wasn't long before we were out at the track trying to figure out just how far it could be jumped. The RZR 800 was immediately an overwhelming success, and Polaris, seeing an almost infinite potential in this style of vehicle, wasted no time bringing us the RZR 800S, which was basically the same as the 800, just 60 inches wide with cool-looking fender flares. The RZR S was really the model that proved just how capable the RZR platform could be. The increase in width, along with the subsequent increase in travel and some upgraded components, allowed riders to go bigger and faster than they ever thought possible on a stock vehicle. After the RZR S, there was a flurry of activity behind the curtain at Polaris as they began releasing new RZR models in rapid succession. During this time, we got the 800 XC, the RZR 4 800, the RZR 900 XP, the RZR 570, and of course the RZR 4 900. The 900 XP was the first big departure from the original front and rear double A-arm design of the 800 and 800S, and it was released in 2011. It was the first RZR to utilize a 3-link trailing arm rear end that not only increased travel pretty dramatically, but also improved all aspects of the RZR's ride and handling. The 900 also introduced us to sport side-by-sides with horsepower approaching the 100 mark with its 88 ponies. The 4-seat concept was one consumers had been begging for since just after the original 800 hit the shelves, and it again proved to be a huge success, giving entire families the ability to enjoy riding off-road together. One of the more unique models introduced during this time was the RZR 170. While met with some skepticism at first, when consumers found out how fun and durable this vehicle was, it didn't take long for more and more of them to turn up on trails anywhere they were legal. In my mind, it was at this point people really started to ask, what's next? Competition in all categories of pure sport side-by-sides was getting intense, but it just seemed like nobody could capture the magic Polaris had found with the RZR. In 2013, Can-Am released their Maverick 1000 and beat Polaris to the 100 horsepower threshold. In most people's opinions, the Maverick wasn't quite as good in the ride and handling department, but that extra power was definitely exciting. Polaris wasted no time in responding and released the RZR XP 1000 in 2014. This was their first entry into the 100 horsepower side-by-side category, and it was a winner. Where the Maverick had the power but lacked the suspension and handling, the XP 1000 had it all. With this one move, the horsepower war began between Polaris and Can-Am. After the XP 1000, Can-Am took things a step even further with the release of the industry's first factory turbocharged side-by-side. Again though, Polaris was already working on their own Turbo 1000, and the RZR XP Turbo wasn't far behind, showing up in 2015 and besting the Maverick by only a few ponies with 144 at first, but was later on in the season bumped up to 168. The back and forth in horsepower was actually amusing and could be likened to two kids one-upping each other on the playground. In the end, though, both companies found their sweet spot in terms of horsepower, with the final iteration of the RZR XP Turbo settling in at 168 big ones. And in 2017, for the first time in nearly a decade, Polaris went a full season without a major new model release. During this time, though, Can-Am didn't sit still and eventually released the X3 Turbo, with 20+ inches of suspension travel, 170+ horsepower, and a long list of incredible features. Polaris immediately responded with the XP Turbo Dynamics, which brought a higher level of technology to the side-by-side industry than anyone ever thought possible. Fully active suspension gave the XP Turbo just enough of a boost to be exciting for one more season, which was all the time the minds at Polaris needed to bring their biggest, baddest, and most impressive RZR to life, the XP Turbo S. The Turbo S is a completely 100% new vehicle top to bottom that boasts specs like 72-inch width, 25 inches of usable wheel travel, 32-inch tires, 3-inch internal bypass shocks with live valve technology, and Polaris's extreme performance on-demand 4x4 system. The new RZR 1000 Turbo S is the most impressively spec'd side-by-side to date, but Polaris added another unit to the RZR family this season that is a perfect example of the innovation Polaris brings to the off-road market. The new vehicle is the RS1. The RS1 builds on the success of the Ace platform, but it's included in the RZR lineup because it's targeted at the highest level of performance buyer. In only 1 year, it's begun to change the industry once again, and RS1 racing classes are popping up in all different styles of racing, including GNCC, Works, and Best in the Desert, among others. The history of the RZR is a fun journey to take. So much has changed over the past 8 years, but so much has also stayed the same. The whirlwind of progression in that time frame makes it seem like so much more time has passed, but it really has been only just over 10 years. Looking back on it all, one question keeps popping up in the minds of all of us here at Dirt Trax. How has Polaris managed to stay on the cutting edge of pure sport side-by-side design and technology, and how have they managed to maintain their #1 market share by such a huge margin for so long? It's not like they haven't had any competition. The answer may seem simple, but there's more to it than meets the eye. Since day one, Polaris has never sat back and taken a break from RZR development. Where many companies produce a great product and let it ride till it's old news, Polaris takes a great product they already have and outdoes themselves before that first product has a chance to get stale. At any point in the RZR's history, Polaris could have just continued to produce the same vehicles for 3 or 4 seasons. But that never happened. And this made it very difficult for the competition to keep up. Sure, Can-Am beat Polaris to the punch on milestones like 100 horsepower and factory-installed turbos. And Arctic Cat beat them all to the punch on super long-travel 5-link rear suspensions. But the response by Polaris was so swift, those vehicles were never allowed to gain any major traction before Polaris had an answer that was just a tiny bit better. It's pretty clear Polaris has been smart about product development and has been focused on obsoleting their own products before the competition has a chance to do it themselves. Some people around here think that's the wrong way to put it, but I digress. If you're a RZR XP Turbo owner, you've got an incredibly impressive machine that most people will never outgrow. The average guy could keep his XP Turbo for years and never feel the need to upgrade. Except Polaris released the Turbo S, which is better in every way than the XP Turbo. So now the guy who doesn't need anything more than his current XP Turbo now has to have a Turbo S. Polaris essentially made their most current and still highly impressive and competitive side-by-side old news by releasing an even better one. It's a strategy that has worked wonders for them in every aspect of their off-road business. So often we've seen manufacturers maintain the #1 position in a specific market for years, only to be knocked off their pedestal by another competitor. We think the reason this happens is because it's so easy for the market leader to simply look inward and miss what's going on behind them. Polaris isn't like this at all. Yes, they do look inward and are constantly improving their own products simply because they know their own products can be improved. But they also spend a healthy amount of time looking back at their competition to ensure they aren't losing any ground or missing any important customer demands or new technological developments. Polaris invented the pure sport side-by-side class 11 years ago and have been pushing the envelope ever since, pioneering many of the most popular subcategories as well. But the RZR's decade-long journey hasn't been without its ups and downs. There have definitely been some rough patches along the way, but through it all, Polaris continued to raise the bar in the sports side-by-side market, and, in turn, the competition was forced to push their own limits. The result is that everyone, regardless of what brand they ride, benefits from this constant drive of innovation. Thanks for watching this segment of Trax TV. For more great content, make sure you click the links or subscribe to our channel, where we're always updating with new content every day throughout the week.